Okay, here is a translation aiming for a natural, native English feel, capturing the tone and nuances of the original text. Imagine a world where it's not cumbersome scientific treatises, but simple stories of wisdom and the richness of true emotions that hold the power to change lives, opening new horizons of understanding and compassion. Allow yourself to dive into these incredible tales, which, like a quiet stream, will tell you of the grandeur of simplicity, about the importance of freeing your mind from prejudice and opening your heart to the world and its people. Hit that like button and subscribe to the History and Mythology channel so you don't miss out on new amazing stories that can make you see familiar things in a completely different light. In a small village, nestled cozily behind a series of emerald hills and winding streams, stood an old, weathered house. Here lived a sage whose name was known far beyond these lands thanks to his simple, yet extraordinarily profound teachings. Every day as the crimson rays of the setting sun gently touched the tips of the grass, the local villagers would flock to him. They came bearing the burden of their questions, hoping to find answers that could ease their souls and guide them onto the right path. The sage always met them with boundless attention, listening to each one with patience and insight, as if unlocking the hearts and minds of those who genuinely sought knowledge and understanding. One day, a merchant arrived along the dusty roads leading to the village. He was known for his sharp mind and, alas, for an equal measure of cunning. A bright spark burned in his eyes, a desire to prove the superiority of his vast knowledge, acquired through his travels over what he considered merely the simple mix of retold fables of the old sage. Filled with self-satisfaction bordering on contempt, he strode confidently to the threshold of the house, and upon being permitted entry, sat opposite the old man. "Old man," he began with a feigned politeness laced with arrogance, "tell me, are your, banalities enough to counter the brilliant, though in your view, false, wisdom I am prepared to offer you?" The sage, having listened impassively to his audacious challenge, simply smiled warmly. He invited the merchant to share his wisdom, but not just like that, in exchange for a short story about his own life's journey, his travels, and his acquisitions. The merchant, confident that this would be a trivial task and an excellent opportunity to showcase his success, readily began his tale. His words flowed like a torrent, describing how he had traveled the world, amassing immense riches and elevating his name above others. His speech was filled with pride and unconcealed disdain for those who, in his opinion, could not grasp the true meaning of material wealth and business success. He was so absorbed in himself that he completely failed to notice how the sage, while he spoke, quietly and intently began weaving something from clumps of grass plucked from the ground beside him. When the merchant finally concluded his lengthy monologue, the sage held up one of the items he had neatly woven, a small wreath of grass. Holding it gently in his hand, he asked softly, "Tell me, what is truly more important, this humble wreath or the abundance jingling in your purse?" The merchant scoffed contemptuously, certain of the obvious answer. "That's ridiculous," he exclaimed. "The abundance, of course. This wreath is just a simple trinket, fit only for children's games, holding no real value." The sage did not insist or argue. He simply placed the wreath carefully on the low table between them, adding with the same quiet smile, "It is woven from the simplest grasses, the kind you might not even notice beneath your feet. But look how skillfully they intertwine, creating a form that possesses its own beauty and can serve as an adornment. So too can knowledge, shared sincerely, be woven into something far more beautiful and valuable than any treasure." The merchant, utterly unsatisfied with this analogy, leaned towards the wreath on the table, still feeling superior. With slight disdain, he gently tugged at one of the stems, as if testing its fragility, intending to break it off. At that very moment, the stem snapped, and the entire wreath disintegrated into separate, unconnected blades of grass. Seeing this, the merchant couldn't help but smirk, full of triumphant scorn. "See, Look what remains of your wisdom when put to the test." The sage expressed neither surprise nor annoyance. He merely closed his eyes for a moment and calmly continued observing the scattered blades. "Just as the branch cannot tolerate violence," he said in a quiet but firm voice that seemed to fill the room, "so too true wisdom cannot be torn apart or destroyed by the force of empty words or crude actions," the sage continued, looking directly into the merchant's eyes. "If you cannot respect the small things, if you despise simplicity and fragility, how can you expect to truly appreciate or even see something great and genuinely valuable?" These simple words, spoken without pressure but with unshakable confidence, like a stream of life-giving water, slowly but surely penetrated the merchant's consciousness, disrupting the usual flow of his thoughts. Suddenly, like a flash, he recalled a long-forgotten image, how his own beloved grandmother, whose hands smelled of herbs and earth, used to weave small wreaths of wildflowers for him, gifting him moments of pure childhood joy. He felt something inside him, something long forgotten and suppressed, stir and respond to these memories. The sage continued, his voice soft, almost sympathetic. "We all seek something, strive for more, but sometimes in this race for illusions, we lose the most important thing: simplicity of vision and a sense of connection with the world. Do not forget your deep, unbreakable bond with what surrounds you every minute. Be attentive and respectful to that which perhaps, out of arrogance or ignorance, you are ready to reject or despise." The merchant, reminded of the tender experiences of his distant childhood, stared at the old man, and at that moment it was as if a veil had fallen from his eyes. He realized the vast, gaping chasm between his accumulated money and what could actually bring him true, lasting happiness. Taking a deep breath, he made a crucial decision for himself. From now on, he would seek not only material wealth, but also genuine values in simple things, in moments, in connections, just as his beloved relative from the past had once done naturally and effortlessly. The sage, maintaining his unwavering calm and wisdom, added to his thoughts. When a person's mind becomes open and receptive, like a boundless sky suddenly filled with the sun's radiance, only then, in that pure light, does true understanding of the world and oneself begin. Filled with entirely new thoughts and feelings, the merchant slowly stood up. With a sense of deep respect he had never felt before, he bowed to the old man, a gesture completely out of character for his usual behavior, and left the sage's house. And the sage, remaining seated, merely smiled faintly, knowing with absolute certainty that just one seemingly simple encounter and a few spoken words had managed to touch a man's soul and perhaps change the entire course of his future life. Over the following days, the sage, continuing his mentorship, used various stories, parables, and life examples to generously share his wisdom and knowledge with the young man, who now seemed more like an inquisitive student than a proud merchant. Each new lesson, every word heard, forced him to rethink his former life, his values, and the pride that had dominated his mind for so long. The old man told the story of a simple fisherman who, overcome by greed, tried to catch far more fish in his net than it could hold, ultimately losing not only the entire catch, but the net itself. This instructive lesson, told with quiet empathy, gradually helped the young man realize how his own boundless ambitions and drive to accumulate had gripped his mind, preventing him from seeing the beauty and value in the simplest things and moments of life. One day, as the morning sun began painting the horizon in soft pastel hues, promising a new day, the sage invited the young man to join him for a walk to the riverbank. In the distance, shrouded in a light mist, stood the modest silhouette of a small fisherman's cottage. Along the way, the old man explained that this fisherman, though possessing no material wealth, had such inner strength, such profound peace, that many kings might envy him. "His wealth is not in gold, but in his soul," the sage said softly. They approached the cottage, which looked very simple yet surprisingly harmonious with the surrounding landscape, and the old man knocked gently on the door. Almost immediately, the fisherman appeared on the threshold with a kind, welcoming smile, as if he had been expecting their visit. "Welcome, my friends. How pleasant it is to see faces full of genuine curiosity and openness," the fisherman said, his voice warm and hospitable, inviting them into his humble but cozy home. Inside the cottage, furnished very simply but tastefully, everything seemed to be in its place and radiated a special beauty. There was an unusually warm, enveloping atmosphere. The air was filled with the appetizing smell of freshly cooked fish soup, immediately creating a sense of comfort, domestic happiness, and abundance. Though this abundance lay not in luxury, but in heartfelt warmth. The sage introduced the young man to the fisherman, calling him his companion in the pursuit of wisdom, and invited the fisherman to tell his story, the one the sage had mentioned earlier. The fisherman, nodding in agreement, began his unhurried tale, his voice calm and thoughtful. "Once I was just as greedy as many others whose lives are closely tied to the river and its gifts," he confessed. "My net brought me a good, sometimes even very rich catch, and I never thought about being content with little. My only goal was to take as much as possible, to surpass everyone." One day during a particularly successful haul, when the net was full of fish, I decided it wasn't enough. I wanted to catch more, much more than my boat or net could handle, the fisherman continued, a shadow of regret flickering in his voice. "I was so blinded by greed that I listened neither to the voice of reason nor the warnings of nature. And in the end, when I tried to pull the overly heavy load from the water, my old but faithful net couldn't take it. It tore, and I was left with completely empty hands and, far worse, a cold, empty heart. In that bitter moment, standing on the bank and watching the remnants of my net carried away by the current, I understood the terrible truth. My greed had robbed me not only of my catch and my tool, but also of the ability to see and feel joy in the simplest, everyday things that surrounded me daily." The sage listened attentively, nodding approvingly, while the young man became more and more immersed in the fisherman's sincere story. He felt the simple man's words penetrating deep into his soul, awakening long-suppressed doubts and forcing him to reflect on his own behavior, his aspirations, and the countless missed opportunities to enjoy life. "Since then, I made an important decision. No longer to blindly chase wealth or huge catches," the fisherman went on, a calm, inner light kindling in his eyes. "Instead, I am learning to truly enjoy life itself and the amazing nature that surrounds me. Every time I pull in my modest net, I sincerely thank the river for every gift it sends me, whether it's a large fish or a very small one. I've learned to see the extraordinary beauty in the fleeting ripples of the water, in the reflection of the sky on its surface, in the quiet whisper of the wind caressing the leaves of the trees, and in the birdsong at dawn." He sighed, smiling. "It's not always easy, of course, because sometimes the old temptation to reach for more, for what once seemed the only goal, still rises in the depths of my heart. But now when I catch just a couple of fish a day, enough to feed my family, I feel truly rich. I have a loving family, loyal friends, and most importantly, genuine inner freedom that no amount of money can buy." Having heard the fisherman, the sage turned to the young man with a question that seemed to hang in the air. "What do you now think truly measures wealth? The amount of gold and power one can accumulate, or the deep inner peace and unconditional love we are willing to give and receive from others?" The young man sat thoughtfully, his mind grappling with this seemingly simple yet complex question. A clear understanding grew within him that life's true values lay not in the unrestrained accumulation of material goods, but in the ability to appreciate the little one already has, and, even more importantly, in the readiness and capacity to share it generously with others. He began to feel keenly how his own former ambitions had drawn him into a world where there was no room for simple joys, genuine human warmth, or connection with his surroundings. The fisherman's sister, who had been quietly listening to the conversation from another part of the cottage, suddenly spoke up. I always say, she stated softly but firmly, that our catch, our life, all the gifts we have, often go unnoticed and unappreciated. This happens because we are too busy with endless worries about a hazy future, completely failing to see or value the priceless things we have right here and now, right before our eyes. The simple woman's words, filled with deep meaning and practical wisdom, resonated instantly in the young man's heart, like a key unlocking a hidden door. Thus, each lesson, each story told by the sage and the fisherman immersed him deeper into a world whose existence he hadn't even suspected before. It was a world imbued with the spirit of humility, gratitude, and true, unwavering values, completely different from those he had pursued all his life. And gradually, step by step, he began to understand that to accept this new knowledge, this new perspective, he needed to free up space in his soul, to make room for those forgotten joys and simple skills that were once so close to his heart in childhood, but had been pushed aside over time by the pursuit of success and wealth. One day, as the morning light filtered through the dense foliage of the trees, filling the world with a soft golden glow, the young man, now resembling more a thoughtful scholar than a merchant, strolled along a forest path surrounded by lush greenery and colorful flowers. He enjoyed spending time alone with nature, although until recently, his mind had been almost entirely consumed by complex scientific theories and abstract concepts that, like a thick veil, obscured his direct perception of the world around him. His thoughts wandered far away, among formulas and calculations, while his eyes slid over the greenery without truly seeing it. Suddenly, he noticed a simple woman ahead, slightly off the path. She was bent over bright, fragrant flowers, her hair neatly braided, glinting beautifully in the sun. Her hands, he noticed as he approached, were covered in many small scars, traces of hard work. But her face wore a remarkably warm and sincere smile. It seemed this smile held all the secrets of simple human happiness. Approaching closer, the scholar couldn't contain his sudden curiosity. "How can you be so happy?" he asked, his voice sounding a bit abrupt and clumsy against the melodious bird song and quiet rustle of leaves. "Despite the fact that your life, by all appearances, is very hard?" The woman, raising her head, looked directly into his eyes with a clarity, calm, and joy he had rarely noticed in people, let alone seen in himself. "I have learned to find and feel joy in the simplest things," she replied softly, continuing to gather flowers. "Every flower I hold in my hands, every morning I see dew on the grass, reminds me of nature's infinite grace and how important it is to be genuinely content with the little we have, to cherish every moment." These words, so simple in form yet filled with extraordinarily deep truth, suddenly struck a chord with the scholar. He suddenly realized with painful clarity that his relentless pursuit of knowledge accumulation, achievement, and recognition had essentially closed his eyes to an entire world filled with countless simple joys. He recognized that he too often forgot to stop, to simply breathe in the fragrance of flowers, feel the coolness of morning rain on his skin, or just enjoy the play of sunlight filtering through the leaves and dancing on the grass. At that moment, his heart filled with a mixture of embarrassment and an inexplicable, deep gratitude for this unexpected encounter. "But how do you cope with difficulties, with pain, with loss?" he asked, feeling his question sounded too mundane and down to earth in light of the serene wisdom and strength radiating from this woman. She answered with a smile that spoke of years of life experience and incredible inner resilience. "Every difficulty, every pain, every trial," she said, "is actually an opportunity to see how strong, how resilient I can be. I learn from nature, my dear man. She doesn't rely on external grandeur or protection. She simply accepts everything given to her, sun, rain, and storms, and unfolds in all her extraordinary, unshakable beauty, following her nature." These moments, concentrated in just a few phrases, reflected in the scholar's soul like the radiance of light caught in a tiny dewdrop. He felt anew a long-lost connection with the world he lived in, and understood that he had a unique opportunity not just to study life from the outside, analyzing it, but to truly live it, feeling its every moment. Through the simple, work-worn hands of this woman, carefully gathering flowers, he saw genuine, unpretentious beauty in the simplicity of human joys and the resilience of the spirit. When the scholar, having said goodbye, left the woman, he felt an extraordinary lightness in his heart, as if a huge burden, the existence of which he hadn't even suspected, had been lifted from his shoulders. He continued on his way, but now with a completely new inner purpose and perspective. He began actively generating insights and epiphanies from random observations, from seemingly insignificant details. He realized that life's true, deepest lessons are often hidden precisely in the simplest things and everyday moments. He grasped that true knowledge is not only what can be memorized from books or learned from lectures, but also what can be felt, lived, and understood through sincere receptivity and openness to the surrounding world. On that day, he didn't just meet a simple woman. He came to know the true power of small joys, which, when accumulated, shape within us genuine, unwavering happiness. Returning to the sage's house after his wanderings and encounters, he suddenly began noticing the smallest details he had previously ignored entirely or considered insignificant. The fine lines on old clay pottery, the intricate hand-carved patterns on the surface of the wooden table. Now he saw in them something more than just soulless household items. Each of these simple elements seemed imbued with deep meaning, history, and a unique, quiet beauty. He started to understand that everything around him, every object, every touch, was a reminder of countless human experiences, of the hands that had labored to create them, of the souls that sought to impart a piece of themselves into these items. Each pattern on the pottery, each scratch on the wood told its own unique story. One bowl, for instance, with small but noticeable cracks, reminded him of the incredible courage and stubbornness of an old potter who might have worked late into the night by the light of a flickering lamp, creating each piece with unquenchable hope and perseverance, oblivious to fatigue. Another bowl, covered in a deep blue glaze with golden streaks, seemed to him the embodiment of a bold dream, whispering softly of endless possibilities waiting to be explored, to be brought to life. These small, previously unnoticed details began to connect in his mind, creating new, complex patterns of the myth of human creativity, labor, and inspiration. He looked at the old table, made of dark, massive wood, with entirely new strength and depth. Its surface was riddled with lines, marks, and scratches, each of which, he now understood, had its own unique story. He imagined the children of this house playing at this table, the family gathering here every evening for dinner, sharing the joys of the past day and bitter sorrows. This table, in reality, had become a silent witness to the entire life lived in this house, full of echoes of laughter and shed tears. What had previously seemed to him merely a functional piece of furniture now became a powerful symbol of the connection between generations, of community, and of unshakable family warmth. When it was time to bid farewell to the sage, the young man, the former merchant, now transformed, feeling deep and sincere respect, thanked him heartily for all the priceless lessons, for every conversation, for every discovery. He now looked at the world and himself with a completely new inner understanding. The sage, keenly sensing the changes within him, smiled. His eyes sparkled with a special, wise light, as if he had known from the beginning how significant and pivotal this moment would be for his student's life. "Now you have seen not only the world in all its diversity," he said in a quiet but distinct voice, "but also yourself in its abstractions, in its reflections. And know this, to truly understand, to grow, you must first learn to ask the right questions, not merely seek ready-made answers that someone else has already found." These words, like seeds, fell into the fertile soil of his mind and stayed with him long after he began his journey back to his hometown, back to his former life. Along the way, he tirelessly reflected on how much his entire life could have changed if he had earlier allowed himself to be more open, more receptive, and capable of truly appreciating the ideas and experiences of others, even those he considered beneath him. After long and deep reflections that accompanied him the entire way, he made a firm decision. He would return to his own students and begin to change their way of thinking. He would no longer simply impose his ready-made ideas on how everything should be, how to live correctly, or what to consider truth. Instead, he would encourage them in every way towards independent exploration, towards not being afraid to ask questions, even the seemingly most naive or audacious ones, and learn to find their own answers, forging their unique path to understanding. Arriving in the city, he gathered his students under the sprawling trees, where they usually held their classes. With a sense of joy for the upcoming changes, but also with a slight reminder of his former arrogance, he opened the lesson with an uncharacteristically hesitant smile. "Today, my dear students, we will talk about how to ask questions," he announced, feeling the excitement of fundamentally changing his usual teaching methods rise within him. The students, initially perplexed by such an unusual topic and manner, soon overcame their confusion and began asking questions. And every question asked, even the simplest, seemed to open previously invisible doors into new realms of knowledge and understanding. Soon they were no longer just listening, but actively participating. They began discussing, arguing, expressing their viewpoints, and sharing the mental images of their thoughts. These lively discussions revealed not only the topics that truly concerned their minds, but also their own inner turmoil, fears, and hopes. Those images and feelings that had previously remained hidden and unnoticed. With each new lesson, he understood more deeply that teaching had become, for him, not just a one-way transfer of ready-made knowledge from teacher to students, but a living, two-way process of joint searching, deep exploration of the inner connections that, like invisible threads, weave through their lives, connecting them to the world and each other. The students learned to see the world not only through the familiar prism of the known and understood, but also in its shadows, in its indistinct contours, hiding countless undiscovered answers and possibilities. In the small village nestled among majestic mountains and crystal rivers, around the same time the sage was hosting the scholar in his humble home, another man, sighing heavily, was also approaching the same place. But a completely different burden lay heavy on his heart. His life, shared with a wife whose heart was full of insatiable greed and a passion for accumulating material wealth, had become an unbearable load for him. Every morning he woke with the oppressive awareness that his own courage and desire to live differently were shattering against the invisible but insurmountable walls of her ruthless avarice. And his natural kindness and sincere desire to help the poor and needy villagers seemed to evaporate into thin air, finding not the slightest support nor even simple understanding from the person closest to him. Every time he, following the call of his heart, tried to share a piece of bread with the village poor or visited the elderly in need of care and simple human companionship, his wife reacted with undisguised irritation and even anger. She acted as if his small acts of kindness posed a direct threat to their own savings, as if every apple or coin given away was torn from her personal wealth. On one such day, filled with despair and hopelessness, he made the difficult decision to go to the sage and complain about his bitter lot, about his wife, about his ruined life. With a final hope for wise words that, he believed, could change his life, his family's life, he set off. Along the way, he endlessly thought about how drastically his cherished dreams of a kind, caring, and generous family had been destroyed by this all-consuming greed. And despite all his inner turmoil, he kept walking forward, guided only by this fragile, yet so important, hope. When the man finally reached the sage's house, the wise man, merely glancing at his face, dulled by sorrow, and his stooped shoulders, immediately understood that here was a man carrying a heavy burden. He gently invited him inside, and the man, enveloped in the cozy warmth and soft light filling the room, felt the tension ease slightly. With gestures full of expectation and hope, he began telling the sage about his deep troubles. He described how his wife relentlessly accumulated wealth, indifferently ignoring those desperately in need of help, of simple human involvement. He felt that the life he believed was meant for him, a life full of kindness, generosity, and service, was slipping away like sand through his fingers. It was especially painful to see how his wife, conversely, consciously placed herself at the center of her own all-encompassing world of acquisitiveness, pushing away everyone who didn't fit into that picture. The sage, listening attentively and silently, without interrupting or judging, proposed an unusual solution: to travel together to the man's home so the sage could observe firsthand the life unfolding there. Along the way, walking slowly side by side, he began sharing his thoughts on the importance not only of what we physically hold in our hands or coffers, but also of the irreplaceable things we irrevocably lose when we refuse to share them with others. These seemingly simple yet extraordinarily profound truths made the man seriously reflect on his life, his actions, and his wife's actions. The conversation flowed unhurriedly, but each turn revealed something new in his own heart, as if freeing something long locked inside. And suddenly he felt like a free bird that had been caged by selfishness and despair for years, and was now finally given the chance to fly. As they approached his house, the sage gently reminded him that with every gesture of kindness and generosity towards others, we actually strengthen not only them, but also our own inner happiness and peace. The man, listening to the sage's words, seemed to absorb them with every fiber of his being, and with each minute since their conversation began, he felt his formidable, heavy thoughts of missed opportunities and hopelessness gradually dissipate, leaving space in his soul for fragile but crucial hope. A light of understanding dawned within him, and tiny moments of clarity filled his heart like morning dew. With every step bringing them closer to his doorstep, this man began to realize that his wife's greed had impacted not only their family relationship, not only himself, but the very spirit of the village, the relationships between neighbors. He understood that his own actions were not just his personal business, but also his responsibility, his concern for those around him, for the well-being of the entire community. And with this new profound awareness, with this filled heart, he hurried home, eager to start acting, to open his heart to caring and attending to others, hoping that perhaps this would be the first, albeit small, step towards healing their family life and the life of the entire village. When they returned to the man's house, the sage approached his wife directly. Without saying a word, he extended his hand to her, palm tightly clenched. She, clearly puzzled by this unusual gesture, responded by looking at him with distrust and a question in her eyes. He asked her how she would describe his closed hand, what epithet she might use. After a moment's thought, she replied that it would be unnatural, as a hand is meant to be open. Then the sage slowly and ceremoniously opened his palm, revealing it to be completely empty. And so it is with the heart, he concluded his unusual demonstration. It must be ready to freely receive and freely give. Only then does it truly live. He left her standing in confusion, but a barely perceptible, bewildered spark of understanding flickered in her eyes, like a ray of light penetrating a long-shuttered room. The next morning, as the first tentative rays of sun illuminated their home, the woman found that the vagueness and confusion that had gripped her the day before were gradually dissolving, giving way to a new feeling. She recalled the sage's words again and again, and with each minute spent discussing her inner state with her husband, the power of those words grew, acquiring new meanings. He accepted her fears and doubts with understanding and warmth, but at the same time, he sensed that she was slowly but surely beginning to open up to new possibilities, a new perspective. It was a complex, multifaceted process in which they were both deeply involved, though each moved at their own unique pace. Overcoming internal barriers. A few days passed, and the woman, feeling an inner impulse, decided to take the first decisive step towards changing her established habits and way of thinking. At the marketplace, amidst the usual hustle and bustle, she saw an old acquaintance whose face expressed deep sorrow and need. His son was seriously ill, and he had absolutely no funds for the necessary treatment. Although before meeting the sage, she would never have considered sharing her resources, whether money or food, this time a strong inner voice, the voice of compassion, prompted her to approach him and offer a helping hand. "I know this might not solve all your problems," she said, handing him a small purse of money, "but please accept this as a small token of support from my heart. Let it be a ray of hope in your trouble." In response to his sincere, gratitude-filled expression, she felt her own heart instantly fill with extraordinary warmth and lightness. When she returned home, her husband, noticing she looked completely different, her face glowing with a new inner joy, asked with surprise what had happened. Beaming with a happiness that was new and unfamiliar to her, she shared the experience of helping her friend. "It was as if I was suddenly freed from an incredibly heavy burden I'd carried for years without realizing it," she said. And their conversation, starting from this small incident, continued to develop, deepening and touching upon new themes. They discussed how sometimes it's necessary to boldly break familiar, constricting patterns of behavior and thought to allow life to flow freely, easily, and comfortably, filling with new meanings and joys. Soon, having developed a taste for kindness and generosity, she decided to engage in other good deeds. Understanding that even the smallest steps can lead to large and significant changes, she went to the market again, this time with a specific purpose: to buy groceries for the local shelter where destitute children lived. "I never thought this could become something so important and meaningful to me," she confessed to her husband, who was immensely proud of the new desires and aspirations she had awakened within herself. Gradually, she began to notice that her husband was also starting to be enveloped by these same feelings, the desire to help, to share, to be part of something bigger. Gently encouraging him, she suggested they participate in charitable activities together, making them joint actions, a common cause. This brought them even closer than ever before, strengthening their bond on a completely new level. They became more attentive to each other, more open, discussing not only their feelings and experiences, but also their innermost dreams, dreams that slowly began to take on real features and the possibility of realization. One evening, as they were having dinner in their cozy dining room, their child, who had previously often been silent and reserved, suddenly decided to actively participate in the adults' conversation. He started talking about his own desires to help others, about how he wanted to be useful to the world. "I want to be like Mom and Dad," he said with childlike sincerity, "to do good things and bring joy to people." And both parents, almost simultaneously, exchanged glances filled with inexpressible pride and deep, quiet joy for their child. These changes, starting with one simple lesson from the sage and a small spark of understanding, permeated literally every aspect of their lives, transforming it from within. They realized that happiness found through acts of acceptance, generosity, and compassion creates an endless, unbreakable circle of good that expands, encompassing more and more people. And every action, every word now became a reflection of the profound inner changes that had occurred in their souls. The warmth radiating from their new approach to life, from their open hearts, made their home a true place of love, peace, and light. In this home, not only the material side of life was valued, but far more importantly, the true, powerful strength of the human heart, capable of boundless kindness and compassion. The changes in the woman's and her family's lives didn't happen instantly, overnight, but over the following weeks, she persistently continued to perform small but significant acts of kindness. At first, it was simply giving leftover food to a neighbor in need, then offering her help to those who desperately needed it, expecting nothing in return. These small, seemingly insignificant steps began gradually but surely changing their lives for the better, initiating a flow of kindness that, like a warm current, enveloped their family and spread to their immediate surroundings, to the entire community. With each new act of kindness, their hearts became more open, more receptive to the needs of others. One day when she went outside simply to take a walk and enjoy the fresh air, she stumbled upon an old woman sitting on the roadside. The old woman looked exhausted, tired, and utterly alone. Her hands trembled noticeably from the cold, even though the day wasn't very chilly. The woman, without hesitation, approached her, moved by a sudden surge of compassion, and offered her the warmth of her heart, the warmth of her care. Instead of just walking past, as she might have done before, she sat down beside her, carefully wrapped the elderly lady in her warm scarf, and offered her some food she had prepared for her own breakfast. The old woman, initially wary and distrustful of the stranger, soon accepted her unexpected kindness with deep gratitude. Admiration and surprise reflected in her eyes as she began to talk about her long and difficult life, about how once she too could afford to be caring and generous, helping others. This simple, unhurried conversation, sparked by an act of kindness, turned out to be a kind of invisible thread that tightly bound their hearts. The woman learned about places that were once full of life, about people who were no longer there. The food and kindness offered were, for the old woman, a dance of memories of brighter, happier times. Instead of feeling lonely and lost in this big world, the woman felt that deep connection and genuine understanding arise precisely from such simple, sincere human bonds, from the willingness to share the warmth of one's soul. With each passing day, her desire to do good grew, becoming stronger and more natural. She began to notice not only the old woman, whom she now visited regularly, but also other people around her, who had their own stories, needs, and pains. She started actively joining community gatherings where people discussed together how to help those in need. There she met like-minded people, allies in her new sincere aspiration to create a more caring, cohesive, and compassionate environment for everyone. Every time she took up needlework or prepared food, tender thoughts of her neighbors, their needs and joys, made her actions especially warm and meaningful. She didn't just mechanically distribute leftovers or care for others. She began to truly see and appreciate the joy that lit up people's eyes when they felt support, understanding, and unconditional love. This opened entirely new horizons of perception for her, prompting deep reflection on how much one can do for the world and for others without expecting absolutely anything in return. Many in this village lived in poverty and hardship. Her family, until recently mired in acquisitiveness, was not the only one in turmoil, seeking a way out of a vicious cycle of problems. Other villagers were also searching for hope, for meaning, and the woman found it by helping these people. One day, while helping a family repair their dilapidated house, she noticed the infectious laughter of children playing nearby, full of sincerity and carelessness, filling the air with light and joy. This laughter was a wonderful, living confirmation that even the smallest, seemingly insignificant good deeds can evoke a huge, multiplied response in the hearts of others and bring joy. Each day spent serving others, she collected new stories of resilience, hope, gratitude, that inspired her, and her own fears, difficulties, and past problems began to seem less burdensome, less insurmountable. Several months passed, and although problems remained in the village, as in any community, she understood the main thing. It's impossible to change the entire vast world overnight, but you can start small. All that's needed to begin this process of positive change is to take small, sincere steps of kindness, which, like a warm blanket, can embrace the entire street, the entire village with warmth and compassion, weaving people's lives into a single, strong fabric of care and love. The existence of her and her acquaintances, the life of the entire village, became brighter and more meaningful, even amidst the simplest daily chores. Their hearts were open, and the time came when the kindness they had sown began to multiply with incredible speed. Like a wildflower blooming in a spring meadow after a long winter, suddenly enveloping all life around with its beauty. Over time, both husband and wife, completely transformed by the sage's lessons and their own experiences, began actively participating in their town's community gatherings. At these meetings, residents discussed important ideas concerning the community's well-being and sought new approaches to helping the poor and needy. Every time the villagers gathered, a special spirit of unity, mutual understanding, and common purpose filled the air. This spirit manifested in their open smiles, respectful glances at one another, and readiness to listen and be heard. At these meetings, people shared not only material aid or practical advice, but also personal stories. Stories of overcoming adversity, of hope, of gratitude. This helped everyone present to see more deeply how their lives were closely intertwined, creating a single whole. One day during one such meeting, the local elder raised the issue of urgent help for the village's homeless residents, who had neither shelter nor food. This topic sparked a lively discussion, but it was the former merchant's wife and her husband, transformed by wisdom, who became the main voices, proposing their ideas and drawing on their own recent and life-affirming experiences of change. Their words, sincerity, and faith were so convincing that soon most other residents believed in them and in the possibility of real change. The woman, once focused only on accumulation, now shared her experience of how love and compassion, settled in her heart, had allowed her to change not only her own life, but also the lives of many others she had touched with her kindness. The man who once suffered from his own greed and selfishness now openly illuminated these moments from his past, helping others understand that true wealth lies not in accumulating things, but in the infinite desire to share what you have, be it material goods, time, or simply the warmth of your soul. People began listening to their words as they proposed simple yet effective ideas. For example, creating a local shelter for the homeless during cold weather, or organizing a food exchange system, which would promote a fairer distribution of resources within the community. One such proposal, concerning the creation of a food bank where residents could bring surplus food and share it with those in dire need, sparked an extraordinary revival of self-worth in the hearts of many, both givers and receivers. It allowed everyone to feel valued and important to their community. Gradually, this community, which had previously been fragmented and wary, became open and cohesive. Extraordinary mutual understanding and deep trust were strengthened through joint discussion of problems and collaborative work towards solutions. Neighbors no longer looked with distrust or suspicion at those who once seemed alien or different. They became part of a single large family, where everyone was ready to help another, knowing that together they were much stronger than alone. This process of joint creation not only improved the life of the entire village, but also brought them closer together, and with each step they took together, their own calling to help others became clearer and more defined. Even when hard times came, they remained united, understanding that true wealth is not measured by material possessions and accounts, but by how they care for each other and their community, by the invisible but strong bonds that unite them. This new philosophy, based on kindness and mutual support, became the foundation of their lives, granting them incredible courage and unwavering hope for a better future. Thus united, they created new opportunities where previously only poverty, despair, and disunity reigned. And every villager could be proud that they had become a better version of themselves thanks to these changes. With each new community meeting, the number of residents wishing to actively help and participate in village life steadily grew. Strangers became friends, and together they rediscovered the joy hidden in every small gesture of kindness, every word of support, every smile. A new spirit of unity and mutual aid flourished among them, and they couldn't help but rejoice that they were now experiencing happy moments that didn't just happen to them, but moments they actively built around themselves with their own hands and open hearts. Together, they strengthened their bonds, their relationships, and refocused on what truly matters in life: love, supporting one another, and sincere care for those nearby. One evening, as the couple sat down to dinner in their transformed home, the woman, reflecting on her past actions and the changes she had undergone, remarked with a touch of sadness, "I kept my hands closed for so long, as if shielding myself from the world, not realizing how it distanced me not only from other people, but from life itself." These words, spoken with such tenderness and gentle sorrow, seemed to awaken feelings in her husband that had long laid dormant deep within his heart. He nodded, understanding her completely, feeling how this sincerity and vulnerability suddenly freed them both from an invisible weight they had carried for so long without even noticing. It was a moment of profound revelation, allowing them to see what is usually hidden behind daily worries, routine, and fears. She continued, her voice growing more confident as she spoke about how her fear of loss, fear of vulnerability, had deprived them of the opportunity to share not only material things, but also the most intimate things: emotions, thoughts, dreams. "I had long forgotten what it's like to truly open up, to trust," she confessed, as if absorbing every word she spoke, realizing its significance. "It always seemed to me that security lay in complete control over everything around me, over my feelings. But I completely failed to realize that this was actually blocking my path to true happiness, to deep and sincere relationships." He felt her words resonate with his own inner struggles, with his past closed-off nature. He remembered how he himself often hid his true thoughts and feelings, afraid they wouldn't be accepted, that he wouldn't be understood or would be judged. He spoke to her about his fears, and their conversation became deeper, more candid, and healing. "I too closed myself off for a very long time," he admitted, looking at her tenderly. "But with each day spent beside you in this new sincerity, I understand more clearly that it only isolated us from each other, creating an invisible wall where unity should have been." With each new breath, each new admission, they felt the heavy burden they had carried on their shoulders for so long gradually diminish, dissolving into the air. Allowing themselves to be vulnerable with each other, they began to realize the true, invaluable worth of openness, honesty, and trust. "We could have learned so much about each other," he said, reflecting on how much time had been wasted, how many opportunities for closeness and understanding had been missed simply because they hadn't dared to take the first step towards each other. During the meal, slowly and thoughtfully, they gradually began sharing their most cherished dreams, desires, and hopes, things they had never spoken aloud before. Each new look into each other's eyes, full of understanding and acceptance, filled their hearts with new strength and hope. The small things they talked about, unobtrusive childhood memories, simple childhood dreams, joyful moments spent with friends, all created a magical atmosphere of trust and intimacy, in which they both felt not just spouses, but true, faithful companions on life's journey, walking the same path. Thus their relationship, which had long seemed stagnant or even poisoned by past hurts and fears, began to blossom, like flowers finally reaching for the sunlight they had previously prevented from entering their lives. Opening up to each other, they became not only pillars of support, but also sources of inspiration for one another, and began to feel increasingly relaxed and natural in their interactions. Fears that once seemed insurmountable and destructive began to dissipate like morning mist at dawn, giving way to light and clarity. Every word spoken at that table sounded with new power, filled with meaning and sincerity. Month after month, their hearts filled with warmth, trust, and mutual understanding. "We must never give up what is truly important to us, our feelings, our connections," she said, looking at him with a gentle smile full of tenderness and wisdom. He felt a deep joy rising within him, the kind of joy that was sometimes so hard to find amidst the endless daily routine and worries. With each sincere admission, they grew closer and closer, creating a special space around them where a true miracle could happen. the miracle of deep understanding and acceptance of each other. Now, as their glasses filled not only with wine but with unbreakable hope for a shared future, each of their evenings took on a new, profound meaning. He knew that ahead, of course, lay more trials and difficulties, but he already felt with his whole soul that together, supporting each other, they could overcome any obstacles, any adversities. Reflecting on the future, they no longer feared it because they knew they were not walking alone now. Step by step, moving forward hand in hand, they were creating their own new path together, a path full of light, love, understanding, and inexhaustible hope. In a quiet lane, among lushly blooming trees where sunlight filtered through dense foliage, creating whimsical patterns on the ground, a new chapter began for the couple who had once struggled to find common ground, separated by a wall of misunderstanding. They both worked on their small plot of land, which they once shared without much enthusiasm, viewing it more as a burden than a source of joy. But now, as their hearts began opening to each other, as they learned to share and understand, working the land together became not just a duty, but a source of strength, unity, and genuine joy. Instead of perceiving the hard physical labor as a tiring burden, they found satisfaction and happiness in every completed task, working side by side, smiling and laughing together, sharing stories and dreams. One day, while tending the garden, they noticed neighbors watching them with obvious curiosity and surprise. The villagers, accustomed to seeing them in a state of constant alienation or even hostility, began noticing the radical changes in their relationship and behavior. Neighbors who previously avoided them and preferred to keep their distance now started approaching, not only to catch up on the latest news, but also to ask for advice. Advice on caring for plants, cultivating the land, how best to tend their own gardens. This growing closeness with those around them became a new tradition, filled with trust and mutual help. And every time someone came to them for help or advice, their connection not only with that person, but also with each other, grew stronger, more solid, just as the stems of the plants in their carefully tended garden grew stronger. One day, an old woman dropped by, asking for help with her vegetable patch. She explained that her own garden, her only source of sustenance, was yielding poorly this year due to her illness and lack of strength. Together, without hesitation, they went to her place and, working on her land under the gentle sun, began to notice how such a simple task, helping a neighbor, could incredibly unite people, erase boundaries, and strengthen bonds. These moments, working side by side, laughing, recalling funny stories from their childhood, or simply enjoying the peace and quiet of nature, fortified their ties, making their connection truly unbreakable. The couple realized that their care for others, their willingness to share their time and energy, brought back the warmth and sincerity they had long lost, mired in their selfish pursuits. The quality of their new, transformed bond became an amazing, inspiring example for all the villagers. People started coming to them not only for advice on plants or help in the garden, but also for support during difficult times, for a wise word, for kind counsel. One day, a young family facing serious difficulties and in despair approached them. They shared their fears, their worries, their pain, and the couple, recalling their own challenging journey, how they managed to overcome their internal barriers and external difficulties, shared how they found solace and strength in each other, how they managed to change their lives. These conversations, full of sincerity and compassion, seemed to awaken hope in others, reminding them that even the darkest times have an end, that light always follows darkness. Every morning they began their day together with a tea ceremony. This ritual became for them not just a habit, but a sacred moment of unity and reflection. Over a cup of fragrant tea, in the silence and calm of the morning, they discussed even the most complex and daunting, yet incredibly important topics concerning their lives and the life of the village. They shared their hopes for a bright and happy life together, promised to protect and support each other, no matter the burden, no matter the difficulties that might arise. their home filled with determination and quiet confidence in the future. And simple things like a cup of warm tea became an integral part of their new meaningful life. This wonderful atmosphere prevailing in their home had a profound impact on everyone who crossed its threshold. Friends and neighbors visiting them felt as if enveloped in warm, accepting embraces. With each portion of kindness, generosity, and understanding they received, they gradually became part of one big family. The couple who once felt animosity and alienation towards each other now became not only an unbreakable support for one another, but also a powerful source of inspiration for the entire village. Their story became a living example for everyone seeking light in the shadow of their own misunderstandings, fears, and resentments. Every smile, every gesture of kindness they offered to others restored their own faith in people and, most importantly, faith in themselves, in their power to change not only their own lives, but the world around them. As the evening glow settled over the village, its soft golden light enveloping the houses like a warm, cozy blanket, more and more friends gathered in their small, transformed home. They came not just for simple companionship, but for the lessons of wisdom that seemed to have permeated every crevice of their lives, making it brighter and more meaningful. People inspired by the couple's example remembered what matters most in the world: sincere human connection, mutual support, and the ability to share not only joys but also difficulties. Each such gathering became a true celebration, filled with ringing laughter, joyful conversations, and the exchange of news and stories. The walls of the house, which once seemed empty and alienating, began to fill with the vibrant sounds of friendship, happiness, and unity. One evening, when everyone was gathered around the large, hospitable table, an old family friend, the village sage himself, shared a story that deeply resonated with everyone present. He spoke of a time when he was still young and how shortly after he began to feel profound inner changes starting in his own life, much like this couple's. His path, like anyone's, was full of trials, difficulties, and searching, but every step towards wisdom, every overcome obstacle, proved invaluable when he shared this experience with those willing to listen and learn. He spoke about how everything in the world is constantly changing and about the true, deep meaning of humility, not as weakness, but as strength. Humility, like the warmth of a hearth, can illuminate the darkest gloom when it descends, warm the soul, and show the way. Such stories, filled with life wisdom and experience, filled their cozy evenings, and each friend coming to this house brought their own experiences, discoveries, and lessons they were ready to share. One guest, an artist, speaking about his creations, noted how his paintings, filled with bright colors and deep meanings, began to reflect life as vividly and multifaceted as their shared presence in this house. Their friendship had become. He emphasized that every detail in his work mattered. Every color, every brushstroke, every line, just as each of them, sitting at this table, was important. It was comparable to their friendship, their relationships. Sometimes even minutes spent in the shadow of doubt or difficulty could only serve to highlight more brightly the vibrant hues of fun, love, and support they gave each other. And although they understood perfectly well that life would always present trials and tribulations, their shared laughter, joy, and strong bond served as a reliable shield against sorrow and disappointment. Every evening they gathered at the table and, raising cups of tea, a symbol of their unity and warmth, made toasts. Toasts to life, to friendship, to love, to continuing to move forward together no matter what. Each such toast, spoken sincerely from the heart, opened their souls to one another, and in this sincerity, they became stronger, more united than ever before. Over time, they learned to let go of everything that bound them, that prevented them from being themselves. Old grudges, fears, prejudices, and this liberation reached every corner of their souls, making them light and free. They became capable of sharing not only joy, but also bitterness, failures, and victories, which further united them and strengthened their bond. Sometimes arguments or slight disagreements arose at the table, but instead of turning into conflicts and destroying relationships, they became stepping stones to greater understanding of each other, to accepting different points of view. Their kindness, openness, and willingness to listen and help attracted new people to their home, those seeking warmth, support, and wise counsel. Every newcomer, whoever they were, became part of their large, welcoming embrace, and soon their house, located in the very heart of the village, transformed into a small bastion of wisdom, love, and human warmth. Now, having passed through their trials and transformations, they truly understood the main thing. It doesn't matter how much material wealth you have. What matters is what you are willing to give to others. In this simple yet profound realization lay the true, incredible power capable not only of changing individual lives, but also of creating a strong, healthy community and building a bright future for all its inhabitants. Every evening, under the soft light of the stars twinkling above the village, their home became that special place where everyone could be themselves, where emotions, stories, and lives intertwined in a continuous flow, like a river crossing green fields, carrying its waters to the ocean. Life continued to flow, ceaselessly, and they, holding hands tightly, overcame all obstacles and difficulties that stood in their path, finding a new, meaningful life in unity, filled with hope, love, and boundless faith and goodness. At sunset, when the sky blazed with indescribable shades of purple, gold, and pink, and the mountains on the horizon seemed shrouded in mysterious clouds, a new, amazing story began to unfold in the small village. The story of the entire community's transformation. People gathering in groups on the streets excitedly exchanged stories about the incredible changes that had touched their lives after one brave couple, having walked their path, decided to radically change their habits, values, and attitude towards the world. Their decision, made possible by the profound wisdom of the old sage, inspired countless neighbors, gifting them hope. Now every villager felt a living, trembling hope that any change for the better was possible, regardless of circumstances, and that they themselves could become the driving force behind these changes. In the new light that spread through the village, the young couple in question became not just residents, but symbols of change, living examples that transformation is possible. People began to gather around them, eager to learn the secrets of their amazing transformation, to understand how they managed to find such peace and joy. For them, this wasn't just an empty play on words or theoretical reasoning. It was a living, convincing reflection of how even the simplest, seemingly insignificant things and actions, dictated by an open heart, can radically change someone's life, filling it with new meaning. Their kindness, patience, willingness to share and help became a model worth following, worth knowing and adopting. Meanwhile, the spacious room in their house, once filled with an atmosphere of mistrust, where they shared their anxieties and grievances, was now filled with ringing laughter, warm conversation, and an atmosphere of sincere friendship. Neighbors came not just as guests, but to listen to stories of how the couple learned to open their hearts to the world, how they took their first tentative steps towards kindness and compassion. Each visitor gradually began to see that life, which sometimes seemed full of cruelty and misfortune, could become much brighter, more meaningful, and happier if one devoted time to good deeds, if one cared for others. At night, when the first stars began to twinkle in the heavens, and the extraneous sounds of the noisy city, somewhere far away, blended with the silence and peace of the village, the couple often went outside. They sat on an old bench framed by flowers and shared their dreams. Dreams awakened in their hearts along with their new life. These dreams were not distant and abstract like the merchants once were, but quite down to earth, real and filled with meaning, about helping more people in the village, creating small miracles every week, bringing joy to children in the shelter and elderly people living alone, Their heartfelt connection with the community grew stronger and deeper each day. They began bringing people together to garden on communal land, to teach children to care for nature, the earth, the plants. The smiles they saw on their neighbors' faces, on the children's faces, were the most precious rewards worth fighting for, worth changing for. Over time, their work, their service to others, became a true art, and the garden itself, grown next to their house, turned into a real oasis of hope, inspiration, and unity for the entire village. Delving deeper into the principles of kindness and compassion, they realized that many young people in the village were full of ambition and energy, but lacked experience, mentorship, the right direction. The couple organized special lessons for them, where they shared not only practical knowledge but also their life experience, their wisdom. They taught them the importance of sharing with others, setting common goals, and taking pride in work done together with others for the common good. Not only their closest neighbors, but also those living a considerable distance away began coming to them, always eager to learn something new, to receive a fresh dose of wisdom and inspiration. And then one day, as the joyful cry of celebration rang out over the village, it became clear. The tree, whose blossoming all the villagers had worked towards for years, the tree of change and hope, had finally bloomed in all its glory. Bright, fragrant flowers sparkled in the sun, reminding everyone how important it is to care for one another, how crucial mutual help and unity are. Every step taken on the path towards a land of love, compassion, and resilience brought the villagers closer to a deep understanding that even the smallest, seemingly insignificant actions, performed with an open heart, can trigger an incredible chain reaction, capable of changing entire lives, transforming an entire community. Many months passed, and the village blossomed more and more, filling with life, light, and joy. Smiles and happiness became familiar expressions on the faces of every inhabitant. And every event that took place in their small, transformed town, every gathering, every joint effort showed how much they had learned, how much they had changed. Every villager knew that, of course, new trials and difficulties lay ahead, for life is never simple. But no one doubted the strength of their hearts, their ability to follow the chosen path of goodness, supporting each other. And this granted them the most important thing: unwavering hope. Hope for a bright, happy, and meaningful future they were building together.